So, we're going to discuss problems with dualism and physicalism 101, which is identity theory. So this time, guys, I want to do stuff a little differently. You know how for the last 2 lectures, it's basically been me out there talking about content, and I occasionally put you guys on the spot by asking you difficult questions. Well, this time, I want it to be the other way around. I'm going to give you guys still some information, but I want you guys to kind of put me on the spot with difficult questions, which means you guys get to speak more. So after this session, you should be able to identify at least 3 problems of dualism, describe what is the difference between type identity and token identity, and since last session you are so passionate about identity, I actually listened, and this is what we're going to talk about. And you guys will also be able to describe identity theory and evaluate it critically, and also have a hopefully pleasant experience of group discussions. In this session, there's obviously less people, so I think there will be less pressure. And I'm actually gonna skip the first dualism problem part because I want to go for identity theory first. I want to make sure we have enough time. So, what is identity theory? It basically says the mind is identical to the brain. Notice how I boldened this identical here, right? It actually means something quite special, or it actually has multiple interpretations that we're going to discuss later. Hi. So, why should we have this notion of identity theory? Why should we say the mind is identical to the brain? Well, that is because of the Occam's razor. Well, what is Occam's razor? It is not something that you guys use to trim your beard, and I'm completely confident with my mustache. I don't need a razor. But anyway, it is a philosophical concept, right? It just says if you have 2 theories that are explaining one thing, the simpler theory that is sufficient to explain the stuff is a better working theory. Here's an example, right? You see Jeremy as he leaves the soccer field. He is crying. And when you look at the scoreboard, you see he lost the game 6-1. Now, which one is a more reasonable explanation of Jeremy crying? First explanation, Jeremy lost the game. Second explanation, in the middle of the game, Jeremy's teammate got kidnapped by Martian aliens who hijacked Elon Musk's starship with plasma guns to land on Earth and wants to take away Jeremy's teammate because he was not tracking the runner from the midfield, which is seen as very, very bad sportsmanship by the Martians. And not tracking man is indeed a very bad sportsmanship, though. So, well, because Jeremy's teammate got kidnapped, and Jeremy is a really sympathetic person. Okay, very well. So, which one is a more, reasonable explanation? Second one? Why is it more reasonable?
Because we cannot conceivably lose the game.
All right, thank you for your confidence in my soccer skills.
What? Is it aliens like this? Aliens are real. What?
Aliens are real. Maybe they are real. The thing is, the second assumption is not considered as a worse one because we can disprove that, Elon Musk's starship is hijacked. It's not because we can disprove the Martians' existence. It is because in the second explanation, we have a bunch more stuff to explain. Martians, starship, plasma guns. Whereas in the first explanation, there is only, one stuff we have to explain, lost the game, and we have good evidence for that. So by choosing the first explanation, we are sort of avoiding a lot of trouble to explain this redundant stuff. And Occam's razor wants to kind of, erase this redundant theory. And how does that relate to consciousness? How does that relate to the mind? Well, it's kind of the same deal as the Martian soccer game here, right? So you see a lump of meat, brain, that is conscious. Which one is a more plausible explanation? First one, this meat is supporting some physical processes that renders it conscious. Second one, there is a all-loving and all-capable God that for some reason gave the meat some mental substance which does not interact with the physical world whatsoever, but renders the physical meat conscious. This is identity theory, this is dualism. It just seems like identity theory, mind is identical to the physical meat, is easier to explain because for dualism, we have to explain 2 stuff, right? The mental world, physical world, and maybe also their interaction. But for physicalism, at least for identity theory, We only need to explain one stuff, which is how is the physical meat working. At least one step seems to be, an easier explanation than two. That's the intuition. So for now though, remember how when I introduced identity theory, I bolden this identical because that can have multiple meanings. So 2 minutes, get into groups of 3 to 4, discuss what does it mean for two things to be identical. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt your fantastic dialogue. Now I think we should reconvene, and this is how it's gonna work. So I want each group to have a representative to share about their view and talk at most 1 minute. And to make sure kind of only one person talks at one time, I'm gonna pass this microphone to whoever that is talking. And remember, when you don't have the microphone, try not to speak.
Okay, so we came to the conclusion identical means it has the same properties, which includes like position and time. And Daniel made the argument that surroundings don't count for properties.
Go ahead. Our group thinks that there are different levels of identicalities, with the strictest one being every single property, including time and space, will be the same. For example, if there are two oxygen atoms placed next side by side, they will have the exact chemical makeup and number of electrons and neutrons, but they're different. They're different atoms in the sense that they don't occupy the same space, but they are identical in the sense. If we exclude space as a criteria of identicality, they are the same. So there are different levels of identicality, and according to how strict this identicality is, the number of criteria also changes.
For example, of atoms that you were talking about, maybe there are two same copies of the same kind of model. They are identical in one way, but also they are two kind of distinct entities. In that manner, they are not identical in some way, right? So,
yeah. So we agree with everybody else. Basically, at one extreme of the definition of identity, there can't be two things that are not identical. It can only be one thing, if that makes sense. If we go to the strictest definition, and the thing shares time and space, then it's just the one thing. And one way to sort of prove that practically would be to say, okay, so fine, we have two hydrogen atoms, one proton, one electron, they're identical, but we put them side by side, and in an hour they'll be doing different things because they're not identical in this other strict definition. The other thing, basically, so what do we do then with the definition? Is it a useless definition? You could just say, well, a practical definition of identity is I cannot tell the difference when I look at them. So I could say two people are identical because if Sam has a twin and I can't tell the difference from here, then they're identical as far as I'm concerned. That would be a practical definition. Given whatever tools I have for discernment, can I tell the difference between the two?
very good. So Dr. Garcia mentioned a very interesting point that we're going to talk about. That is, he said if two things are truly identical, they can't really be two things. They must be pointing towards this one and the same entity, the same stuff. Since there is not too much debate, I'm gonna skip the space for debate part, and also we're running a little short of time. So for our purposes, there are two different distinctions on the definition of identity. The first one is token identity versus type identity. Unfortunately, when I was talking on stage, I messed up on the content of this part. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut off this part for this video. The correct version is going to be covered in the next video. I'm just gonna skip to the second kind of distinction of identity, which is compositional identity and identity by definition. Identity of definition versus identity of composition. What does identity of definition mean? Well, that just means two things are the same by their very definition. So, for example, a sibling is identical to a brother or sister, or a circle is identical to a set of points equidistant from a center point. Notice, you can establish these identities just from sort of thinking, what does sibling mean? Aha! it is a brother or sister. Or just by thinking, mathematically, how do we define a circle? And then you come up with this, right? When two things are identical by definition, they are defined in terms of each other, and therefore they are true necessarily, because it is just literally what does the word mean. Yeah, because for example, 3 plus 5 is identical to 8, right? In this case, I'm defining 8 in terms of 3 plus 5. I'm defining 3 plus 5 in terms of 8. So they are also, yes, identical by their definition. Their values. So another type of identity on the opposite spectrum is identity of composition. That means if two things are the same, they are the same by the states of the world. For example, Napoleon is identical to the Emperor of France. In this case, to confirm this identity, I can't really think about, what does Napoleon mean? What does the Emperor of France mean? Right? You can't really figure that out by definition. The only way for you to confirm is Napoleon, the Emperor of France, is that you need to read the history book, obtain empirical information of the world, and see, is this statement consistent with the actual world? Same here. Jeremy is identical to the goalkeeper of the soccer team. I can't figure out what is Jeremy doing in the soccer team by just thinking about what does Jeremy mean, right? I can't really figure this out. I actually need to go to my coach perhaps, or ask my teammate, what is Jeremy doing in the team? So they are true contingently, meaning they are true depending on what the world is. They are not always true, neither they can be always false. If the world changes, for example, if Jeremy quits the soccer team, this identity no longer established. This identity no longer stands. So, coming back to the identity theory of mind, what kind of identity do we mean here when we say conscious mental state is identical to the state of the brain? Is it type identical or token identical? Is it identity of composition or identity of definition? The first debate that I want to start introduce is identity of composition versus definition. What does that mean in this context? Identity of composition means we actually need to do some neuroscientific investigation or physical investigation of the world to see if consciousness is the same as the brain. Whereas identity by definition means we can just establish that identity by just thinking about what is consciousness? What does the brain mean? So these are very, very different views. Again, 2 minutes, same deal.
So that's what we're addressing.
Yeah, which one do you prefer? These are guiding questions. Guys, I would have to interrupt you because we are running very, very short on time. Guys. Thinkers, we would have to reconvene. I'm sorry, I have to skip this section because we literally have like 5 minutes left. So I need to jump to why does most philosophers, including me, thinks identity of composition is a better identity? Well, if we think the mind and the brain are the same by definition, it will cause us trouble. What exactly is it? Well, if two things are the same by definition, when we are describing one, we must be describing another, right? If, let's say, a square is an equilateral rectangle, square, equilateral rectangle, they are the same by definition. When we are describing one stuff, we must necessarily be describing another stuff. But in the case of sensations, conscious states, and brain states, they are not the same. For example, here is my favorite novel, War and Peace. This is the actual sentence of what Prince Andrei Bolkonsky said to his lover, Natasha. And this is a more neuroscientific interpretation. This conveys the sort of sensation. This conveys the brain state. So I need one volunteer, two volunteers, one boy, one girl. One is Andrei, one is Natasha. Anyone wants to read these out? Can you be Natasha? I'll be Andrei. I'm recording this though, so you will be on YouTube, so just letting you know. Okay. All right, Natasha, come on. So, dear Natasha, I have loved you from the very first moment that I saw you. May I hope you say yes or whatever.
Yes.
Oh my God, my heart is so warm. I love you so much. So, that's very romantic, right? I love Natasha. That's a very warm convey of my sensational love. But what does this sound like? I'm conveying my brain states right now. So, Natasha, from the initial moment of visual perception, my affective neural system have engaged in patterns consistent with romantic attachment. May I anticipate, sorry, why am I laughing? May I anticipate reciprocal neurochemical engagement? That one, right, is terribly unromantic. Now, Natasha, are you deeply touched by this statement?
You're out of money. Yes.
But in reality though, if, chances are a real girl probably wouldn't like this compared to I love you. Right? Maybe they like that. But, I'm pretty sure that, thank you, Natasha, you can come back. I'm pretty sure that these two statements, initial moment of visual perception, my affective neural system, blah, 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 and I love you, they convey pretty different meanings, right? You can infer nothing of love when you are saying this from the definition. And also you can infer, like when Andre is saying, I love you, Natasha, you can infer nothing about his brain state from the definition of thinking, what does love mean, right? True that love is sort of equivalent to affective neural system, whatever patterns. But that identity is established through scientific studies, through empirical observation. Therefore, identity of composition, which is exactly that, is a better identity. Make sense? And also for my future wife, I know I am a aspiring neuroanesthesiologist. I love neuroscience, but when I say I love you, I probably prefer, this one, yeah. And explanation number 2. The two states are confirmed differently. What do I mean by that? Well, if two things are the same by definition, when I'm confirming one thing, I must also be confirming another because they are the same by definition. When I'm confirming this, this shape is an equilateral rectangle, I must also be confirming that this shape is a square, right? But when I'm confirming love, when I'm saying, do you love me, Natasha? I am confirming her sensation towards me through words. Though some of you may say that you can never confirm love because people are liars and humans are evil. Maybe that is true. Let's see how it goes after 20 years. Anyway, when I'm confirming brain states though, I need to go through brain scans, fMRI, PET, EEG. So love, sensation, this kind of conscious experience, this qualia, if you remember, is confirmed through a different way compared to, neural system brain patterns. This means we actually need to do some neuroscience to investigate this identity between brain state and mental state. What does that mean exactly? Here's an example. Say Jeremy, he is a really curious teenager about clouds. When he is young, he said, aha, there's a cloud there. 40 years later, he became a cloud scientist. He discovered that clouds is a bunch of semi-transparent water molecules, this physical essence of clouds. Now, when Jeremy is saying cloud when he was young, nothing is implied from the definition of clouds that, it is a bunch of semi-transparent water molecules. This identity is established through scientific studies of the clouds, is established through getting a bachelor's degree, getting to college, which I'm trying very hard to do that, and also the painstaking process of PhD, which both of you guys know very well. Yeah. Yes, Dr. DJ. Sorry. So the fact that Jeremy found out clouds is a semi-transparent water molecule is not through thinking about what does a cloud mean, but rather investigate the stuff scientifically. And we are looking to do the same stuff with brain and conscious mental states. That's what we're looking to do. I do have more to talk about, but we are going very over time and there's a club after this, so I'll save this. Thank you guys for participating. Thank you.